Hey folks, in the previous video about Kamal, I hinted that we were going to cover streaming Tubo streams in this one, and that's exactly what we are going to do. You may not know this, but I maintain the Tubo Laravel package, which is the backend integration to build hot-wired applications in Laravel. It integrates with Turbo.js, which is the core feature of Hotwire. I have other videos on Hotwire in this channel, so you might already know this. Hotwire is an umbrella term for a different approach of building modern web applications without having to write a lot of JavaScript. And the core library for hot-wired applications is Turbo.js. Turbo.js comes with a set of features that we can use in a hot-wired application: Turbo Drive, Turbo Frames, and Turbo Streams. And today we are going to talk specifically about Turbo Streams. If we go to the documentation on Turbo Streams, there's a lot of ways we can use Turbo Streams. Perhaps the most simple one is just adding that to the HTML document, and when the Turbo Stream tag gets added to the DOM, it self-activates. And one example that we could see over here is on this page. Let's just jump into the code over here real quick, and then I'll open that screen, and this is it. And now let's give it an ID over here of title, and then we are going to create a Turbo Stream tag. So, and over here I can just say Turbo Stream, then it accepts a template. So let's just do that. And over here, hello from Turbo Stream. And there's a set of actions that I could choose for a Turbo Stream over here. There are like 9 default actions, I believe. And the one that we're going to use is the update. So I can just say action update, and then the target will be title. And this is the ID that we gave it over here. And just doing that, you can see that it already activated, right? So if we refresh the page, you can see that the title flicks a little bit. That's because it came with the HTML over here saying what's up and then the name of the user. But then as soon as the Turbo Stream entered the DOM, it self-activates and it updates the element that we gave it to update, right? With this content. So this is the most simple way that we can use Turbo Streams, and this is already really cool because we can include Turbo Streams in certain actions, in certain pieces of our HTML, and then when that Turbo Stream tag gets activated, it just updates other sections of the page with the things that we want. But there is another way that we can use Turbo Streams. Perhaps if we take a look at the chat messages controller, we can see that. Over here, first of all, this is the application that we deployed in the previous video about Kamal. It's a simple LLM playground kind of application. I can just talk to tell me something about Laravel, and it should just, talk to a llama locally and generate some texts. It's not that relevant. We are mostly interested in the streaming characteristic of this application. Right now, it's actually using WebSockets to broadcast the message. So this text is being generated in background. So it's sent to a queue, and there is a worker process that actually generates this text, and then it updates the model on each chunk, on each token that the LLM gives us. And then each single update of that generates a Turbo Stream that gets broadcasted to everyone connected to this page. There's a lot going on, but our code doesn't actually say anything. So when we say over here in the chats controller, when we create a chat, we just create the chat normally. Behind the scenes, what we are doing over here is we are creating the chat over here. So this is in the user model. There's a method there to create the chat with the first messages. Then we create the chat and we create the first messages in the chat. So there's a chat model with the create message with reply method on it, which creates the message that the user created and also creates the reply. This message model is where the magic happens, right? So there is a generatable behavior over here, a trait. Whenever a message model is created, we just generate the content later. And there's a should generate method over here to decide if it should generate or not. Because I'm putting some behavior in concerns, in traits over here. And I know that's not very common in Laravel. It's something that I'm using more and more these days. But I think it actually works out really well, given that you add some ways to disable it. And this is exactly what we are doing. So we have this should generate method, which checks a static property. Should I generate this message? And then there are some helper methods over here that I can trigger and I can call, and it will disable this behavior for me in some cases. This is useful if we are in testing, for instance. Another check that it does over here is that the message is processing. So in my tests, when I'm testing this, I can just set the status to something other than processing, and then it's not actually going to activate the generation, which is not relevant over here. But what is relevant is that when a message is created, when a message from the assistant is created, we generate it later. So the generate later just broadcasts a chain of jobs, and in this case it's the generate message and one for generating title. If we take a look at that one, we are just calling the generate now message, the generate now method in the trait, in the message itself, passing the completions class, which is a thin abstraction that I added to talk to LLMs model. This helper method over here, it's just because I'm returning generator over here, so I'm yielding back to the caller. And in this case, I don't actually do anything with it, so I just iterate through it, and this is exactly what this helper method is doing, just for eaching the generator and the iterator until it actually has nothing. It's like draining the generator. But what is important over here is the generate now, which takes a completions model. This is where the magic happens. So it actually passes the message to the generate method in the completions abstraction, and for each chunk that it receives, it itself updates the completion, the message model, and then it just self-updates again, but marking the message as done. And that's about it. So this actually happens in background on this job over here. When we already have the chat created, I can still keep talking to the model. So tell me something else about Laravel. And it will do the same thing again, but this time it doesn't actually create a chat. So this submits to the chat messages controller. And over here is where we are taking a look at another way of using tubu streams. We can return tubu streams directly to the browser. And how does that work? Whenever Tubu is making a request that we want it to support tubu streams from the backend, Tubu will add a special content type over here to the accept header of the request, right? This is specific MIME type over here is telling our backend, hey, I got Tubu enabled in the front end, so you can return Tubu streams, a Tubu stream document if you want to. So that's what we are doing over here in the backend. We are not returning a regular HTML page. We are returning a document that only contains Tubu stream tags. And this is what we can see over here. So if we check the response headers, content type is exactly the same MIME type that the Tubu added to the accept header. So this is what we call content negotiation, right? So the front end is negotiating with the backend saying, hey, I support these content types. You can return whatever content type you want, and I'll deal with it. In this case, we are returning the content type of Tubu stream, which is a variant of HTML. And then we just return a set of Tubu streams over here, and the client side will know how to deal with it because it told the backend that it accepts it. So it actually knows how to deal with Tubu stream documents, right? And we are returning 3 Tubu streams over here. One is the message that the user entered to prepend the message, and another message over here, which is the reply, and another one over here to reset the form, right? Third way of using Tubu streams is actually broadcasting them via WebSockets. So over here we have a socket connection where we send the Tubu stream to all connected users. And over here there's this event. You can see over here that it's actually broadcasting the full HTML for a Tubu stream. So this is one example, another example of using Tubu stream. So we saw 3 ways of using Tubu streams. Notice though that this one is actually, even though the tag is called Tubu stream, we are not actually streaming. This one, the WebSockets one, is the closest one to streaming because we are just sending a bunch of them over the wire. Our HTTP response for the form submit was actually not streamed. It was sent back in full, right? The full document was returned to the user. This is cool, this works, but it's not actually how most streaming UIs are doing these days. So I thought it would be cool if we could just keep using this HTTP request that triggered the form submit and just stream a bunch of tuple streams from that. And that's exactly what we are going to do. To learn how we are going to do that, and by the way, there's a documentation over here in the tuple documentation on tuple streams on how that all works. You can check it out if you want to. But so I thought it would be a good exercise to show you how you can source dive tuple and learn a few things and augment it to your own application, because tuple is really flexible. The first thing that we need to take a look, so let's take a look at how it does that. So let's open the fetch request, which is where the magic happens. And over here, we can see that there is a perform method, which sends the prepare request to some kind of delegate. And if we take a look at the places where prepare request is being implemented, or the possible delegates, we can have some hints on where this logic is added, right? So the first one that we're going to take a look is, first of all, there's a bunch of places where this prepare request is being implemented, because there's a bunch of features in tuple that actually make use of that. But we are mostly interested in the form submission, which is this one over here. So whenever a form is submitted, the stream content type is added to the request, right? And this content type is exactly the one that we are checking in the backend. It's added to the request over here. So this is actually the fetch request, and there is an accept header, I think. So accept response type is where we are setting the header, the accept header, to the MIME type that the user gave. And this is exactly how tuple handles it. So whenever a form is submitted and tuple is activated, tuple will just call the prepare request passing, which sets the accept header on that. But this should signal to the backend that it supports tuple streams, but how does it detect that the backend actually returns tuple streams? So this is tuple has a set of observers over here. One of them is the stream observer. So whenever our request starts, these observers, they are called, and then it just adds its own response inspector over here. And this response inspector, first of all, it listens on the tuple before fetch response. Then it actually checks if it got back a response from the backend, and if so, it also checks if the response is of tuple streams. And it does that by checking if the content type matches the one from the stream message. And if it does, then it just prevents default, so tuple drive won't do anything, and this observer is actually the one that will receive the message. So it gets the HTML, and then it just calls the received message delegate over here, which is actually implemented in the session. So the session will render the tuple stream messages. And this is what is happening. So the observer receives the message and hijacks the fetch response and doesn't let tuple drive handle it. It handles it itself. So we can build a similar workflow over here in our case, in our application. So let's go back to the tuple LLM, and then over here we are going to create our own stimulus controller. So let's just use stimulus make over here, and I'm gonna say stream request. Stream request is a good name, I think. Let's go there. And then over here, we'll mimic what the observer was doing. So there is a prepare request method over here, which will receive something, some event. And then let's just console log that. And then there is another one for inspecting, right? Inspect fetch response, which will receive an event, and then we'll just console log that as well. And I'm doing that because there are many events that we could listen to. In this case, we are only interested in one tuple before form submit, I think, but it could be on any kind of event. So for this to work, let's go to the show chat message over here. So there's a message form partial, and then over here we just register the data controller, which should be streamed request. And then we are going to register some actions over here, which is actually the event name that we are going to listen, which in this case is tuple submit start. And then we are going to call the stream request controller, and we are calling the prepare request method on that. And then similar to how Turbo is doing the observer over here, we are also going to inspect this event, and then we are going to call the request inspect fetch response. I believe that's it. So let's go to the controller over here, to the stimulus controller, and then we'll just do a event.prevent default. So we can stop the request from being sent, just so we can inspect what is happening. And then let's take a look over here at the console and tell me something else about Laravel. And then, as you can see over here, it actually sent the request. I didn't want it to send, but it's fine. So the idea over here is that we'll receive a detail object over here with a form submission, and then we have access to the fetch request, which gives us access to the fetch response. So detail, form submission, fetch requests, fetch options. Over here we have the headers, right? So that's where we're going to add. So let's create another class over here. So streamed request message. This will be actually it should be static content type. Yeah, that's okay, I think, but let's just do a streamed Turbo stream, because that's what we are doing over here. Let's take a look at how Turbo does that for the message itself, text, and then yeah, it should be just text. vnd.turbostream.streamed turbo streams. Yes, that's fine. We're going to say events.detail.form submission fetch request fetch options, and then inside fetch options we have the headers. So this will be the accept headers. And just so we are nice citizens over here, let's just do our concatenation. So join, yes, like that. So we are just telling Turbo add this new content type to the request, and then once we get to the backend, then let's see if it actually does that, right? So tell me something else about Laravel, and hit submit, and then check the headers over here. Our accept header should have a new content type, which it does. Now in the backend we can just say chat messages, and let's just do, before we do anything over here, let's just return a if request accepts, and then we give it custom MIME type that we have. So if it supports that, then we just return a Turbo, actually a response stream. Over here we can just do, first of all, we have to set a bunch of headers for a streamed response. These are not all the headers that we have to set. So let's take a look at what Laravel does over here. So there's this. Let's go to the response factory and then stream. So over here we also have to return this, and now we can just echo out, but let's just do a Turbo stream update the title with updated via streams, streamed Turbo streams. We have to flush the, so now we are detecting that the client supports it, and we are returning exactly that HTML content type. So in the client side over here, in the response, we can check in the same way that Turbo is doing. Actually, we can probably just steal that, copy that, and implement it over here. Let's just make it protected, and it should be it. So now we can just return a response. Yep, and then if response, and yes, that, exactly that. So we just do a prevent default, just like Turbo is doing, and then we can do response, console log that response. Let's just do that instead of checking for the type. And then over here, we just have to do streamed request message. Yes, I believe this is it, but let's take a look. So reloaded, and then tell me something about Laravel, and let's see. So it actually returned the content type should be exactly the one that we're expecting, so that's fine. And then it returned that. So over here, we can see that the response was returned like this. So that's good. Now we just have to receive the streamed response, right? From this streamed response, from this response, and then received streamed response. So in our case, we want the body over here to be this one, but we also want the reader to be this one. Actually, we don't want the body. We just want the response body reader like this. And then we have a decoder, which is this object that we'll use to decode the response body from the backend. And then we'll just start processing. So there will be a try catch over here. And finally, once it's done, we can release the reader lock. And over here, we can start actually processing the request, the response. So we will do a while true, and then we will have to turn this message over here into an async function because we are going to use some await. So this over here will return done and value from the reader, and then we can start processing the chunks, right? So when we're streaming content from the backend, from HTTP, we'll receive it in chunk. In our case, we want each chunk to be a single TurboStream tag. So this will actually, we will actually do that tone break over here, but this is at the end. And over here, we'll just check on the chunk like this. Okay, so we'll decode the value, and then this is actually not needed. And then it's also streaming over here because we might return, new lines. So if there is a chunk, then we'll just console log that chunk over here. And just to test this out, let's sleep for a second after the flush, 3 seconds, and then let's return another one over here. And then that will be it, I think. But we also want this to be PHP AOL, so line break, a new line, and PHP AOL like this. Okay, now let's try again. Tell me something else about Laravel and submit, and then we got an error. That's in our JavaScript over here. So that's because I think we are sending that the response. Yes, so the response is actually this one. Let's console log the response over here to see what we get. Tell me something about Laravel, and then submit, and we got this. So the response is actually one layer below. So let's actually return over here the response like this. Instead of doing that, let's just pass it down like this. So this over here will be response. And then, yeah, then this should work, I think. So let's submit now and see what we get. So we got one chunk over here, which is this, and another one, which is basically 2 chunks of the same TurboStream tag. Just do again over here, so it differentiates it. Now let's submit it again, and then we got one chunk which is this TurboStream, and then another chunk which is this other TurboStream over here. So all we have to do now is actually render those chunks. So we can import the render stream message from Turbo over here, and down here we can actually call render stream message and pass the chunk to that, and then this should actually update the title over here. So let's just go ahead over here and give it a title, an ID like this, and now we can try tell me something, and it actually updated once, and it will update it again, and it's actually already working, so that's pretty cool. So this is actually already a nice prototype for our application. So it would be nice that I wanted to read as close as possible to an actual first-class citizens, right? So let's go to our app service provider over here, and then let's override the request class. I think we have to do through the facade once streamed TurboStreams, and that's actually what we want. So that's pretty cool. And this over here can be just, and that should fix that linting error. So now we can probably just replace this with the once streamed TurboStream, and that should work. So let's take a look. So actually it worked. So that's pretty cool. And now the response over here, it would be cool if we had something like response stream TurboStreams like this, and then we can just yield to it the TurboStream tags. So over here, what I want is yield TurboStream, exactly that, and then sleep for 3 seconds, and then yield another TurboStream like that. And this is exactly what we are going to do. So for that to work, we have to import the response facade, and we had to add our own macro, which is this one. For each tubu streams, yes, that's what we are calling it. And then it will receive a callback. And over here, this is actually wrong. So we want to drain it. So this will be a for each callback as a tubu stream. And then on each one of those, we can just paste this stuff. I'm gonna copy the headers over here, and then we can delete most of it because we only want this section over here. So we don't need this. We just do tubu stream like this, and then that's pretty much it. So now we can use it like this in our application. I think this actually has to use the facade for this to work well. Then let's see if this all works, right? So now we can just tell something again and then see if it actually works. So yes, looks like it's working, so that's cool. Let's change it over here. So 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6, and then submit, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's pretty cool. It's already working. So that's all we need over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to disable the broadcasting in background, because now we actually want to broadcast right here. So we're going to say message without automatically generating if, and then we'll give it a condition and the callback, which is this one. So the condition for it to disable is if the request wants streamed tubu streams. If the request supports streaming tubu streams, we are just going to disable the background broadcasting thing because we are going to do that manually. And that's exactly what we are going to do over here. So we are just moving this down, and then inside of this is where we are actually going to return tubu streams, right? So we are going to return, first of all, let's use the message and the reply, and then we'll yield the tubu stream to prepend the message, and then we'll yield another one to prepend the reply to the chat message. So we also need the chat over here. And now we can actually do reply generate now call, and we'll pass the LLMs, which is something that we'll support in a second, we'll get in a second. And then this will actually reply to us with each chunk, right? But we're not interested in the chunk over here. We'll just trim the reply itself. And let me just fix this yield over here. Now we need these LLMs, which we can get from Laravel's IOC container. So completions will be this, and then we just have the LLMs over here. And now we use it there, and then we just update it over here. In our case, we can just get the reply over here, and then that should be fine. And I believe this is it. So let's take a look at that. We also need one more thing over here. We also need to update so we will update the form with a new one. And I believe this is it. So now it's actually for real. So let's try to use it. Tell me something else about Laravel, and then try to use it and see over here our response. And it's actually flowing and responding well, but we don't see anything happening in the UI. So this is actually just returning the same chunk as we can see over here. So something is up. Let's take a look at the generate now method over here, and it actually passes down the chat messages. So that's cool. Yeah, I don't actually know. Let's just do a reply is equal reply fresh. By default, this is just the convention that we are using. By default, it's using the append, and in this case, we actually wanted to replace. So let's just do replace and then give it the reply and see if that actually works. So tell me something else about Laravel and see if that works. And yes, so looks like it's actually working. So that's pretty cool. Let's delete this chat and start a new one. Tell me something about Laravel. This one is still using the reverb implementation, which we can actually, now that we're here, we can actually change it. So let's go to the chats controller over here. And right here is where we are creating the message. So we can just say message without generating if request once streamed to stream, and then let me see if that is imported, and then it's true, so that's cool. Now we can say if request once stream to streams, then we'll return that. So for this one, we also need the completions over here, completions, but we also need the title generator, which, yes, titles, completions and titles. So this one is a little different because when we are submitting the form, we actually want to redirect the user somewhere else. So we'll need a custom turbo stream tag over here. And for that, we are going to yield the turbo stream, and then we're going to give it an action, which is a custom one. So this will be a visit with a custom attribute, which is location, and then we'll give it the route that we want to redirect the user to. And this is a custom stream action, turbo stream action, so it doesn't actually exist, but we are going to implement it. So let's go to turbo.js, our own implementation over here, and then we're going to say turbo stream actions, and then visit doesn't actually take anything, but then we're just going to say, hey, visit whatever was returned as the location attribute. So this is how we can build custom stream actions in Turbo. And now I believe this is it. So this should at least get us to the new page. So let's try that. Let's go to new chat and then tell me something about Laravel and then submit. And once stream to stream, that's doesn't exist. Probably a typo of mine. Streamed to stream. Let's see here. It's streamed to stream, and this one should also be. Oh, yeah, there was a typo there. Okay, so let's try again. Tell me something about Laravel. Yeah, so it actually redirected us. We got a redirect from the backend. That's because we didn't actually implement it. We're not using the streamed one. So let's just do to stream controller, streamed request, and then data action. Okay, so now let's just delete this and let's delete the other one as well. And now let's try to tell me something about Laravel, and we send it, and it actually returned a 200 OK with our own content type. So that's cool, with a custom visit action, which actually redirected us to the chat show page. So that's cool, but it doesn't actually do anything with it. We disabled the generation in background. So what do we do now? Now we can pretty much loop through the generation. So we actually have to reply to get the reply from the chat messages. And then for each reply using the completions class, we can just replace that in the client side, right? So we can replace everything there. We don't actually have to replace the new message or anything or prepend them because we are redirecting to the new message. So everything should be in place over there. But now that we actually disable the generation in background, we have to take care of generating the title as well. So we just have to call the chat passing generate titles, it like this. And then we just have to replace the title, but we are passing a custom view over here. So this should be it. And I believe this is it. So let's take a look at that over here and tell me something about Laravel and submit. And it actually, well, this is wrong, but let's take by the ID over here. So it's actually getting, because those two messages are being created at the exact same time in the database. So we don't actually want it to collide. So we just say, hey, the latest one based on the ID. Tell me something about Laravel and submit. And then, yes, so that's pretty cool. Now, this is actually visiting, making the page visit to the new page and then streaming down each response over here as a turbo stream, and we receive that from the backend. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, tell me something else about Laravel, and then we'll just, use streamed responses from now on. So that's pretty cool. So it's not actually a lot of code, but it's some code that we need to implement. What is also cool about this is we now actually have two ways of streaming messages. So tell me something about Laravel. And this one, the one that actually created the message, was streaming down to the user from HTTP. The other one is actually receiving them via broadcasting. So we can feed the current user from the HTTP stream response, and then we can tell anyone else that is connected to that page to, update the chunks of the page using turbo streams and broadcasting and all that, and we didn't actually have to change anything for that to work. So yeah, that's it. It's just a few lines of JavaScript code over here, like maybe 65 lines, which is not a lot for the amount of functionality that we are implementing over here. There's some stuff that we could do over here, like detecting that it's actually returning a valid chunk and not an error page. So if you're processing something and it breaks in the backend, we kind of have to deal with that. But over here, we are just ignoring that fact, and we are relying on the fact that we expect turbo streams from the backend as each chunk. So yeah, that's the video. That's how you can augment Turbo. You can build your own abstractions on top of Turbo. Turbo is really flexible, so it gives a lot of control to you. So you can build on top of Turbo and build the experience that you want out of it. So yeah, that's it, and I hope you liked it. I know this wasn't actually very introductory to Turbo itself, but it's something that I wanted to do in a long while. So I was editing this video and I realized that I could simplify things quite a lot over here. So if you remember, in the Kamal video, we actually had to disable buffering for the response over here because we're streaming via HTTP, right? But I was taking a look at how Kamal handles that. And if you look for buffer response, you will find a middleware. It's a Go, but should be able to read it. And there is one method over here which should switch to unbuffered, and it just checks if the content type matches this text event stream. So this event stream is used for server-sent events responses, but we can actually use it for whatever we want. And the benefit of that is that most proxies, they will know not to buffer this content type. So we don't have to actually disable buffering, because Kamal also does that. Cloudflare also does that for event stream over here. So let's remove this from Kamal, and then we have to change it over here to text event stream. And since we are here, I think we can actually simplify this quite a lot. So form submission, fetch request, because if you remember, over here we have a fetch request object, right? So there is this accept response time. So we can just use that and tell it streamed content type like this. And then we don't actually have to do that. And we don't have to touch anything else over here. In our backend, though, we do have to change it over here to text event stream. And we are checking if the request supports it, but this is very generic. So we can actually also say has header over here for the Turbo request ID. So if it has this request ID, which is also added by Turbo, so we can take a look at it over here. Turbo will add this X request ID, and let's copy this and go here as well. Change it. Then we don't actually have to change much. And I believe this is it. So now we should be able to just tell me something about Laravel, and it still works. Now we got an event stream tab over here in the response, and that's because we are returning a text event stream response content type. But everything else is still the same. The benefit over here is that we don't actually have to care about proxies in between our applications buffering responses, because proxies know that this type of response don't need buffering. Another thing that we can clean up over here is that we added a custom turbo stream action for a visit, but we didn't actually have any backend helper. So it would be cool if we could just do like yield turbo stream visit and then have it do it like this. So let's implement that, and we are going to the app service provider. Then we have to import the pending turbo stream and then register our own macro like this. And the macro is for a visit action. This visit action will receive the location where the user will visit. And now we can return this visit And this should actually be location. And this should be, now go back here, and this should still work the same. So we should be able to go to the create action and say, tell me something about Laravel, and it should still work the same. So it visits because it returned to a string visit, and then it started streaming down the response from the LLM. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, that's it. That's how you can augment Turbo. That's how you can implement your own feature of streaming Turbo streams. So yeah, that's it. I hope you liked it, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye.